As you properly stress in your book, Roger, Playing to Win, strategy is a question about choices. Why then is it so difficult for business executives to discard some alternatives and in particular to quit from dying businesses?
I think it's actually a human thing. I think human beings, as we evolved over time, didn't like to cut off options. So if you were a hunter-gatherer out in prehistoric times and you saw a snake, but you didn't like eating snake as much as you like eating, I don't know, water buffalo, you killed the snake and ate the snake just in case the water buffalo didn't come along, right? And I think that's a challenge. It's a challenge for people to say, I will cut this thing off in order to be able to do these other things better. And so it really, to me, is an issue of confidence. The companies that do well are willing to cut some things off to be able to do the other things well, and they're confident that if I do those other things well, I will beat everybody who's unwilling to make a choice. But what I think what has to happen is the person has to essentially go against their instincts for keeping everything alive. You know, I'm going to keep all my businesses alive, even as you say, Ricardo, even that dying business. Oh, maybe we can turn that around. And so it's one of the challenges I have when I work with companies to say we have to ask the question of the things that we really care about in the future. Are we inadvertently starving them because we're feeding those dying businesses? What if we had another, depending on the size of the company, another 10 million, another 100 billion, a million, another $1 billion to go invest in this business where we really think we've got a chance to win? And by doing that, help them see that it, even though they can help that good business kind of go along okay, they're not going to maximize the opportunities, possibilities for that good business if they keep on failing to make choices.
I work a lot with board of directors. My specialty is in corporate governance, and I am convinced of the importance of independent directors. Do you think that then an outsider as consultant with an independent view might help this company to view better the strategy and make clear that a particular business or some particular choices should be discarded?
I think so. I mean, I'm probably biased because I do a bunch of that in my own life and work. But I do think that it is an area where sometimes you're so used to something you can't see it in its truthful state. So if you've always been in a business, you say, well, that's a business since we have always been in, we will always be in, and so we should stay in it. And maybe if an outsider comes and says, and just asks good questions, it's sort of, well, why is it important that we're in this business? Could we shift our resources? So I think an outside perspective can play a useful role. I mean, my hope for a company and its independent board members is the independent board members would play that role, as opposed to the inside board members. The inside board members will probably be a little more maybe captured by the traditions of the company. So you'd hope that the independent board members can ask those kind of questions that would help a company make those kind of decisions.
It is difficult without a winning aspiration to go forward in the second step in your cascade that you so clearly explain in your book, Where to Play. However, the winning aspiration should be presented in a concise, clear, achievable, and inspirational way. Most corporations do not fulfill that and develop more than half-page of a statement with many purposes. With your experience, do you see a way to improve in these regards? And how can we help industries to be more precise in aspirations development?
Yes, I think there is some clear advice from that, and it comes from the framework that you referred to, the Playing to Win framework, where I say, strategy is 5 questions. What's your winning aspiration? Where to play? How to win? What capabilities must be in place? What management systems do you need? The answer to me on aspirations is thinking of winning aspirations as being integrated, not a separate kind of first step. So I think your diagnosis is absolutely right. You get these long, flowery aspiration statements, and they aren't really linked tightly to the where to play, how to win, right? So you might have an aspiration to say, well, we're going to be the absolute best in our industry in the world with kind of the most superior product in the world, and let's say you're a Colombian only, or a Venezuelan only, or a Brazilian only company. Chances are you aren't, right? Chances are, if you don't say our where to play is global, you're probably not going to be the best in the world. And so having that kind of aspiration that doesn't have any reality to it, and I'm not saying a Brazilian or a Colombian company can't be the best in the world, but they'll have to have a where to play choice that's consistent with that. So what I say is, actually, even though winning aspiration is the first box on the diagram, I say don't spend much time on that up front. Spend no more than a half an hour, put down something that is a first cut, and then go and ask, is there a where to play, how to win that's consistent with and reinforcing of that? Oh, if we do choose that where to play, how to win, how would we modify that winning aspiration? What can we take out? Because I think you're right, shorter is better than longer. So it's by flipping back and forth between those questions that you get your best winning aspiration. And in fact, it's funny, Ricardo, I just wrote a blog, an HBR blog that hopefully will be up not too long, about why it's important to link those things together.
On the other hand, often aspirations are fixed in terms of shareholder value and not in terms of customers or other stakeholder satisfaction. Which is more important, and why?
Well, this is funny. Jack Welch is a good friend of mine, and I can only now quote Jack Welch that shareholder value maximization is the dumbest idea in the world. It's what he said recently, or a couple of years ago. Yeah, this is one of the greatest kind of problems in the entire modern business world, the pursuit of shareholder value maximization. And for this, to explain my point of view, I go back to one of my favorite thinkers, authors, writers of all time, Aristotle, who said way back when, 2,500 years ago, if a man seeks to be happy, he is unlikely to end up happy. But if a man seeks to live a good life, by which he meant he contributes to society, to live a good life, he will probably end up happy. The same applies exactly to shareholder value. If a company says, our goal is to maximize shareholder value, yes, that's what we're all about, maximizing shareholder value, chances are their customers aren't going to like them very much. Their employees are going to say, why the heck am I working with this company that just cares about this abstract goal? And by the way, who are those shareholders anyway? Because in a public company, you don't even know who your shareholders are. You get told it every quarter in a regulatory filing that's got names on it, typically of investment managers, not real shareholders. And so what I think is pursuit of shareholder value maximization as your goal makes it much harder to maximize shareholder value. Instead, if you say our job is to pick a set of customers, that's our word to play, and make them deliriously happy, that they're just so happy that we exist. They love our product. There's a much higher chance that your shareholder value will be more maximized than if you say your goal is to maximize shareholder value. So I think you have to understand what's cause and what's effect. And shareholder value maximization is an effect. And you go at it with a cause, and the cause is I think, first and foremost, having a company that's great for customers, but also then one that's great for your employees. This is where I love Johnson & Johnson, the great American company. And Robert Wood Johnson, when he went public, installed this credo because it's a big step to take a private company in 1948 and turn it into a public company. And so he wanted to have this very specific, and essentially their credo, in short, is our customers come first. Although they said patients because they're mainly a healthcare company. Our patients come first. Our employees come second. The communities in which we work and operate come third, and last. He didn't say next. He said last come the shareholders. However, the shareholders shouldn't worry, because if we take care of the first 3 points, they will earn a fair return. And since Johnson & Johnson is now worth about $300 billion, and it was worth, who knows, I don't know, $500 million or whatever when it went public, who's right? Robert Wood Johnson. He's right. They take care of the first 3, and the fourth happens happily. So that's the way I think, if any corporation wants to be successful in the modern business world, they should recognize that shareholder value is a good thing, but it is not something that you can pursue directly. You pursue it indirectly by taking care of customers, taking care of employees, taking care of the communities in which you work, and shareholders will do just fine.
There is a contradiction of duality when you develop a strategy. Are you going to go in a rational approach, or with your imagination and as creativity challenge? Which one of both is more important, or how to mix them? What do you suggest?
Well, here it requires a mix, and here I go back to my old friend Aristotle. Aristotle's an interesting philosopher because in many respects he's the father of all science. He's the first man who thought about cause and effect and what science is, how you could prove and demonstrate something, and arguably, Descartes and Bacon and Newton only formalized the scientific method 2,000 years later. So he is the world's first scientist. And he started a scientific tradition that has shaped the world. A scientific tradition that's about proof and data and rationality and the like. But what most people don't know, because what they know of Aristotle comes from his great book that was the foundational book of science, Analytica Posterior Analytics. He also wrote another book that almost nobody's read called Rhetoric, where he made the point. He said, there's part of the world where things cannot be other than they are, right? So if you hold a rock in your hand and let go of it, what's going to happen? It's going to fall to the ground. right? There's nothing, Ricardo, you or anybody else can do about the rock falling, because that's part of the world where things cannot be other than they are. And what he said, in that part of the world, use essentially analytica posterior, use the scientific method to run experiments to demonstrate that things cannot be other than they are, right? If you drop 1,000 rocks, you'll notice that they all fall, and you'll actually, if you measure it, you'll notice how fast they fall, and you'll figure out that they accelerate at 9.8 meters per second squared. In rhetoric, he pointed out there's a whole other part of the world where things can be other than they are. Right? Did you think in 1995 that you could get your email while you're wandering around the streets?
Yeah.
No, that was not at all obvious. But it turns out that's part of the world where things can be other than they are. And what Aristotle said is, in that world, and this to me, it's fascinating, in that world, don't use the scientific method. He said, don't use anything I wrote about in Analytica Posterior. Don't analyze the data that exists now to come to a conclusion, because you'll come to the wrong conclusion. In that part of the world, he said, your task is to imagine possibilities and choose the one for which the most compelling argument can be made. That is a metaphor for strategy. In strategy, you're always going to have two parts of the world. Part of the world that you're dealing with cannot be other than it is. Laws of gravity and thermodynamics and whatever they run, lots about how a factory would work. But you've also got a part of the world where things can be other than they are, where consumers can change their mind when they see something that they haven't had before. And so that is why there is a deeply problematic aspect to strategy. Strategy as a practice, business strategy as a practice, was actually kind of started by analytically oriented people, great ones. Bruce Henderson arguably is the father of modern business strategy. Founded Boston Consulting Group, one of the greatest thinkers in the history of strategy. But he was a number crunching kind of geek in many respects, and just like people take models, and they say every military pilot sounds like Chuck Yeager. The man, the profile of Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff, because he was the most famous first test pilot, and he had a Texas kind of drawl, and everybody sounds like him. Well, in this case, the entire strategy consulting industry tends to be like Bruce Henderson and say it's about crunching the data, analyzing the data to tell you what you should do, and it's just not it violates the principles of the man who invented data analysis, and that is Aristotle. And so for that reason, the only good strategy is a combination of analysis and creativity. And a key aspect of strategy is being able to determine what is in this figure, the scene I'm surveying as a strategist in my company. What things am I going to trust cannot be other than they are, in which case I will take every piece of data I could possibly put together, analyze it, and figure out how that world works, and exploit that to the maximum. And then what part of the world is it the part where things can be other than they are? And in that part of the world, I have to imagine possibilities. And then of those possibilities, I have to ask, which is the most compelling? Because in that part of the world, essentially, you have to be the agent for change. You have to operate in a way, do things, invest in things to change the way the world is. And of course, we know, Steve Jobs had a wonderful expression for it. I'm going to make a dent in the universe. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by dent the universe? You don't observe the universe, you're denting it. He is changing things. And that will take, as Aristotle said, that'll take a whole lot of consensus building and persuasion. That's why strategy is not a dry analytical exercise. It's a social process. And again, the people who see it as a rational exercise never take into account the social side of it, and therefore their strategies are simply take most advantage of what is, and they will never be remembered for making the world a different and better place.
That's clear. If we think in numbers, could we say that 50% should be creativity and imagination and 50% analytical work, or is there a way to put numbers in that? What do you think?
I think it probably depends on the situation, but I would say it's probably more the can world than the cannot world, right? Right. So I'd say it's 67-33 or 75-25 creativity, in the sense of, and by the definition I'm using in this case is that you are trying to shape a world, bring into being something that does not now exist, a different way of serving customers than they're used to, a different product, a different service, a different way of organizing your company. So I would say it's going to be more about that. And I would say all the strategies, literally all the strategies that you will think back on over the last 20 or 30 years and say, wow, was that ever clever? Was that ever great? Will be more about creativity than about rationality and analysis.
If a company does not have a strategy, it would mean that any path is good. Wherever they go is good because there is not a particular aim. Nevertheless, if you look the literature, many companies or most companies do not have really a clear strategy. They think they have it, but they do not dig inside, and there is no real strategy. Why? What's wrong with enterprises and with business world? What's wrong that they do not understand the importance of fixing a path which would be the strategy for the future?
Sure. So first of all, I just would confirm your estimate entirely. I agree entirely that is the case. And the real problem with it is, if you don't have a strategy, you cannot possibly tell the difference between something that's a good idea, a medium idea, and a horrible idea. It's impossible to discern. Like anything can be argued for, and that is the biggest problem to not having a strategy. Often after the fact, you'll look back at a company that essentially didn't have a strategy and say, were those people idiots? How could have they possibly done something so stupid? The answer is no, they weren't. They were perfectly smart, perfectly hardworking men and women, but because they didn't have a strategy, something that they did, that they invested lots and lots of money in, looked like a good idea because you had no framework or context. You sort of had no objective function to judge it against, and that's what a strategy does for you. The reason I think that is the case, Ricardo, and it's a sad thing, and I don't mean to sound too negative about this, but I've been consulting around the world on strategy and writing about it for 36 years. So I'm getting up there, and my own statistics would say that I think somewhere between 10 and 15% of the CEOs of consequential companies, like forget about the millions and millions of small businesses, I don't have enough of the data on that, but if I just look at big companies, like in America, S&P 500 type companies, and then their equivalent around the world, or the Financial Times top 500 companies, or the Russell 2000. If I looked at that, no more than 15%, and probably closer to 10% of the CEOs of those companies have a useful definition of strategy in their heads. So I think the reason that you, Ricardo, would look at them and say they don't have a strategy has to do with a bunch of the questions you asked me. You see strategy, as I do, as choice, making choices to do some things and not others, having a clear aspiration of where to play, how to win. Most executives think of strategy as a planning exercise. And I surprise a lot of people by saying, I hate strategic planning. And they say, what, Roger, you're a strategy guy. And I say, yes, I am. I'm a strategy guy. I'm not a strategic planner. I couldn't care less. The fact that you've gone through a, quote, planning process that lays out, in a document that looks sort of like a budget, only has a lot of prose, with it, and it's really long. It does lots of charts and graphs, and it explains a whole lot of stuff that the company is going to do in this order and that order. But you cannot figure out by reading that document what is your where to play, how to win, other than, again, as you said in your earlier questions, your where to play, how to win is everywhere we happen to be in now, and we're going to invest in everything we happen to be doing now, and we're going to hope that somehow things will get better, not worse. So the short answer is the practice of strategy has evolved into something that's a rationalist planning exercise where the output is a budget with prose, and it's not guided by the notion that we have to make a few key choices. And so it's the practice overall, and all your questions, Ricardo, link very much together. It's partly a product of this sort of a planning view, a rationalist kind of view, a view that says, if I can get away without making choices, I will sleep more comfortably. All of those things merge together to create an incredible level of mediocrity in strategy in the modern business world. And I'll tell you two kinds of folks who haven't helped enough. One is strategy professors, right? And another is strategy consultants. Right? I think strategy professors have gotten far too interested in arcane piece parts of the world of strategy, and the only way they can get articles published in journals is to focus on as if it's the cannot world. So they focus on developing a big data set and then saying this relates to that, and therefore this is the way the world works. And that's where that industry, the strategy professorial industry, has gone in general. In the strategy consulting, the world has gotten, I think, technocratic. That they come in and say, here's our process for writing a strategic plan. We're going to have these sets of meetings, and we're going to create a document that looks like this. We're going to analyze everything under the sun to explain why the world can't be other than it is. And they aren't helpful enough. Neither are helpful enough to creating a discipline of strategic choice in the world's companies. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I wrote with A.G. Lafley, Playing to Win, to help provide a way of thinking about strategy that is more helpful, hopefully.
That's important because, well, if we think of the new challenge of board of directors, which has changed a lot in the last years, they should be much more involved in the strategy. And actually, the management should work strategy since the beginning with the board of directors. But again, methodologies as the one you propose, which is very pragmatic and down to earth, practical to follow, is a methodology that most board of directors and CEOs do not know. I mean, usually people, when they want to face a strategy, they lack methodology, how to approach the problem of a strategy. So my question would be, should board of directors, should they be lectured about methodologies like yours or other methodologies, but they know that to get a strategy right, they have to use a certain procedure and not just think a strategy. It does not come out by itself. So would you suggest that boards should be as well lectured in methodology of how to develop strategies?
Yeah, sort of partially yes and partially no, I guess. So what I think a board needs to be focused on is enforcing an output. So I think a board should say, management, It's your job to come to the board and tell us what you think the strategy of the company should be, right? If it's our job as the board, we should fire you, right? So it's your job. But I think it's important for a board to say, and here are the characteristics of that strategy. So that strategy has to explain where we're playing and how we're going to win, where we're going to play. If it is vague on those, so we don't exactly know why, and we're actually not playing to win, we're playing to play, then I don't care what methodology you're using. I don't care if you're using the framework from Playing to Win or whatever. You're going to do it again, and you're going to keep doing it again until we, as a board, say, I get it. We're trying to accomplish this by playing here and winning in the following way. And here's why we're investing in these capabilities and these management systems. Now, they might use different words than those. Those are sort of more my words and AG's words. But that's what they need to enforce, and they need to keep telling them to go back until they've done that. And my view on this is, and I've had a back and forth with a great friend of mine who started it, Alex Osterwalder, the Business Model Generation author, which is I think a terrific book, and he's a terrific guy. He and I are in agreement in the importance of the shortness of a strategy. And we've gotten into sort of a kind of Twitter battle with a bunch of people who say, no, it's got to be a long document. My view is your strategy should be on no more than 5 pages, preferably 1. You can describe your strategy on 1 page. If it's more than 5 pages, it's probably a terrible strategy because you actually haven't made choices. And so that, to me, is the role of a board. The board should say to management, you're going to come back and tell me in less than 5 pages, what is our strategy? Now, you may want to when we quiz you and say, oh, why have you chosen that where? You may have 50 pages or 100 pages to say, well, here's how we thought through where to come to this conclusion. But if they present you with a 100-page or 500-page strategy, you should assume it's garbage. It's completely useless and probably worse than useless. And so that's what boards should do. Enforce a definition of strategy, a definition of what the output needs to look like, and then say to management, it's your job. If you want our help, come and ask and whatever, but we're not going to do strategy for you, or we should replace you. And we're not going to say you have to do it with this set of steps or have this people involved or whatever. It's just, it has to be able to tell us the following things. And for me, it's hard. It's super difficult. Maybe I've got a hammer and now everything looks like a nail, but to say that a strategy can be anything other than a statement, and it's hard. That's why I said the heart of strategy is this combination of where to play, how to win. If you can't tell me on what playing fields or battlefields, depending on what imagery you want, you're going to plop down your players or your troops, and if you can't tell me how they're going to do better than anybody else who's in that playing field, you don't have a strategy. You'll just go and do a bunch of random things, spend random amounts of money to produce random results. So tell me the playing field. Tell me how your team is going to win. Tell me why we've got the capabilities that cause you to believe that. And we're trying to accomplish what? What's our winning aspiration? That's a strategy. And you can say that verbally to me. You can say it in 1 page. But if you don't have that, back to work. And my policy on in these things is and when I run things like I ran co-ran the consulting firm that I was in before, and I ran the Rotman School of Management, is I starve people who don't have a strategy. So when I got to the Rotman School, I said every part of the Rotman School, the MBA program, the executive MBA program, everything is going to have a strategy. Every function, every kind of, if you will, business that there is going to have a strategy. And if you didn't have a strategy as a leader, you got no resources. I said, yeah, I'm sorry. No, you can't hire anybody. You can't actually rehire people who've left. I'm taking away 100% of your marketing dollars, because when you don't have a strategy, all you do is waste money. And as a business school, we didn't have enough. We needed more money, and I just said, I can't afford to have you waste it. So just, sorry. And they say, no, you have to let me hire people so that I can do this. Sorry, nope, that's your job. You're the head of it. You figure it out. The minute you've got a great one, boom, I'm going to give you resources. And the first of the management areas that had a great strategy, where essentially the chair of the department said, this is what we're going to try and accomplish. This is how we're going to do it. I gave him so much money that all the other departments are asking, well, why is he your favorite person? And, why are you biased towards them? And I said, no, he's not my favorite person, but he's told me where he's going to play. It was in accounting. Where is he going to play? How's he going to win? I like that. I will throw as many resources as I can at that. And at that point, we didn't have one of the top 50 accounting departments in the business school world. Now we're either 1, 2, or 3, depending on who you listen to. Why? We had a strategy, and we invested behind the strategy. So that would be my advice to boards: just starve. Right? Starve anything that doesn't have a strategy, because you're just completely wasting money. You might as well be going to the bathroom with large, the stacks of money and flushing them down the toilet, just one after another. Flush down. And the only thing that stops that is having a strategy.
Yeah, Roger, the world is moving at terrible speed. Changes are everywhere. So innovation became one point in which all companies must get involved. How do we link strategy with innovation?
Well, the key way for me is to make the core question in strategy, and this is what I say is the most important question in strategy, is not what is true. It's to change the question to what would have to be true. What would have to be true is the most important question in strategy. Because when you start asking the question, what would have to be true, you imagine how you could make these things true. Right? And that's what spurs productive, strategic innovation. To say, well, right now, this is what consumers are like, and this is what they feel. They're not particularly thrilled or happy with what is. Well, what would have to be true for them to be actually deliriously happy? Okay, that's what would have to be true. So let's say it is the late 90s, and email is becoming much more important as a communication vehicle, but you can't get email except when you're sitting at your desk. And so you'd ask the question, well, what would have to be true for users, executives, workers in any company, to actually get their email on their belt while they're working? If you ask that question, what would have to be true, it will spur you to say, well, you'd have to have a device, and off you go for innovation. If you ask the question, what is true, the answer is, what's true is that's not possible. And so you don't even think about trying to create that world. So I always say, if you want to have a great strategy that people are going to remember and thank you for having done, focus on what would have to be true, and then have your strategy be, you're going to make something true that is not currently true. And by doing so, make the life of customers, of whatever sort your customers are, make the life of those customers better. And the more you focus on what is true, the less you'll innovate. You can say we want to be an innovative company, you can spend lots on innovation or whatever, but if you're asking the question, what is true, innovation won't fit into your strategy. It'll just be sort of an afterthought. It's something that I know we're supposed to do, so we'll do it. if you spend your time always asking, like, what would have to be true? What would have to be true? What would have to be true? Innovation will become natural and integrated into your strategy, and therefore integrated into your investment, kind of approach. You'll just see yourself investing more money in those things.
I wonder, what is your experience with Latin American business, Roger? But I think more often here than in USA, our companies lack a strategy. We do not understand clearly the importance of fixing a path for the future. What's your experience with our companies, and what advice could you deliver to our businessmen in that regard?
Well, here's where I would divide Latin American companies and my experience with them into two buckets. Those are the Latin American companies that operate only in their own country, or maybe a little group of countries, geographical little group of companies like maybe Chile and Peru or something, versus the Latin American companies that are global. And to me, the Latin American companies that are global just don't look a whole lot different, don't act a whole lot different than global companies from Europe, and global companies from Australia, and global companies from Canada, and global companies from the US are sort of tend to be the very biggest. But by and large, they just don't look or act all that differently. However, the Latin American companies that tend to be, in a single country, or maybe a small group of countries, actually, aren't all that different from the similar companies in other countries, like the country where I've spent much of my life, Canada, and those companies tend, by and large, not to have very clear strategies. They tend to be in too many businesses. They aren't very choiceful, and they don't have aspirations to win, but they generally have aspirations to play. Not all of them. It's not as though all national companies don't have that. But I think we're getting to a world increasingly where there are only going to be two main kinds of companies in a country. Right. So if you're, I don't know, let's say you're Brazil, you're going to have the local operations of Brazil-based global companies, Embraer, Vale, or whatever. You're going to have those, and you're going to have the local operations of foreign-owned companies, local IBM kind of operations, local GE operations, whatever. And a third kind of company of any consequential size, again, forget small business, but of any consequential size, which is the locally owned national company. They're just going to go away. They're literally going to go away, and they're going to be the victims of foreign companies that have a strategy to win, and they'll be bought up or out-competed. And interestingly enough, this is happening to all countries around the world. So one of the interesting things is, and if you're from Canada, you hear all these arguments, we're being hollowed out. European and US companies and now that are buying up all of our local companies. So we're being hollowed out.
That's clear, yeah.
Wherever I go in the world, every country thinks they're being hollowed out. You go to New Zealand, they think they're being hollowed out. Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Brazil, Argentina, France, UK, everybody. And you'd see there's sort of a physics principle here. Shouldn't there be a kind of equal and opposite? There should be an equal number of hollowers and hollowees. But how could it be that everybody thinks they're being hollowed out? Everybody. And regions of the US think they're being hollowed out. Cities think they're being hollowed out. Kind of the reason is we were moving from a world in which the number one form of company was a local or regional company, and then there were these locally owned multinationals and subs of foreign multinationals. And the first bucket was bigger than the other two buckets. The first bucket is going away. And so what people don't see is what their multinationals, they don't see when Vale buys Inco, one of our big, kind of mining, and one of Canada's big mining companies. People in Brazil don't see that. People in Canada do. They say, "Oh my God, the Brazilians just bought our company." That's happening around the world, and that's why it is a tricky thing that so few of those national companies have got clear strategies, and that's why most of them that aren't regulatorily protected are going to expire. So in that respect, Latin American companies aren't kind of all that different. What Latin America needs are more companies that aspire to play in the global arena. I think when they do, they can. I mean, I think you've got success stories, but not enough of them do. And there's a global shaking out that goes on, and after your industry gets bought up by kind of foreign resources, you don't kind of get it back very often. It stays that way, and so that would be the advice I'd give to any company in Latin America. Just ask the long game and ask what is a where to play that is consistent with you controlling your destiny long term. And it's doubtful the where to play is going to be Colombia or Chile or Peru. It's doubtful. Maybe some of it will be Brazil because Brazil's so darn big, but even that, it's probably not going to be that. It's going to be some other where to play geographic definition, and chances are it's going to be a broader definition of where to play combined with a narrower definition of how to win.
That's clear. Roger, thank you very much. It has been a very rewarding talk for myself, and I think our readers will enjoy that a lot. I only hope that in the future I can invite you down to Colombia and have a personal chat and expose your ideas to our business world. And thank you very much.
I would welcome that. I mean, I do love Latin America, traveling to Latin America. It seems as though my books get published both in the Spanish-speaking and Portuguese-speaking parts of Latin America. So there sounds like there's interest. So I would welcome that opportunity, and I would say thank you for thinking about such a good set of questions. That as you can tell, I was excited about answering the questions because I think they're well thought through, good questions from clearly somebody who thinks a lot about strategy. So it was my pleasure, and I look forward to meeting you in person in Colombia someday.